Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is the hotly anticipated sequel to the movie about the group of outlaws in space, led by this Han Solo-type character in a trench coat, and at first are out for their own selfish reasons, but then they come together and decide they need to do what's right for the greater good, and they come together and save the galaxy. I'm, of course, talking about Serenity. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is written and directed by James Gunn and stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Bradley Cooper, Dave Bautista, Vin Diesel, Kurt Russell, Karen Gillan, and that dude with the sweet ass from Mallrats. Volume 2 takes place just a few months after the original, so it's set somewhere in 2014 if you care about the timeline for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although, for this movie, you really don't have to. It doesn't really... like, the other movies don't really impact it so much. It doesn't really seem to even set up anything, except for kind of maybe a spin-off and Howard the Duck, if that ever comes to fruition. That'd be pretty cool. So only a little bit of time has gone by, so Baby Groot is now Toddler Groot, and he is awesome. He is adorable, of course, but he's also just hilarious, and he's the main point of probably the best opening of a movie in recent memory for me. It's just hilarious, and it fits really well with the tone. It sets the tone for the movie, lets you know what kind of a movie you're in for. And this movie is very funny. It's just as funny as the first, I would say. The cast of the movie is once again great. Chris Pratt is just as good, actually probably a little better than he was in the original, because he has more of an emotional arc to his character. Michael Rooker probably steals the show. They really beefed up his character and give him a lot more to do, and you care a lot more about him. Everybody really, it gets more scenes that really flesh out their characters, with, I think, the exception of Drax. He's a little shortchanged in that area, but he also does have some of the funniest lines in the movie, and he kind of knocks it out of the park every time for that. One thing that I will say, besides the emotional part for Drax that he's kind of lacking, is fighting. He doesn't really fight much. For a character called Drax the Destroyer, he doesn't really destroy much. That's not to say there aren't fight scenes in the movie. There are, and there are very good fight scenes. Specifically one with Yondu and the arrow. It's actually, it's a little more graphic than I expected. But it's set to music, and it's visually stunning. At least parts to it are. And it's one of the more fun scenes in the movie. Even though, like, lots of people are dying, you don't really feel it that way. It's not presented in a serious tone. So it's just fun. Just fun to see tons of bad guys die. As I mentioned, that fight scene was set to music, and the movie does have some really good music in it, very similar to the original. The original had some great music, and I think that this movie, it doesn't, I guess it falls short in comparison to the original as far as the music goes, but it's not to say it's bad. It's actually got a very good soundtrack to it, and they tie one song in particular in very well. The score in the original and in this one are also really good, something that I think it kind of gets overshadowed by the soundtrack, but the score, when it actually comes in, I really like the Guardians of the Galaxy theme. I think it's pretty badass, and they even put it into a song for the credits. So there is a song in the credits that sounds like an 80s or 70s song that is using the Guardians of the Galaxy score, their theme, and incorporating it into the song. It's pretty amazing. Speaking of the credits, you should definitely stick around for the entire length of the credits. There are 5 post-credit scenes, so, you know, put intermittently through it. And besides the actual post-credit scenes, there are also funny shots of the different characters dancing around for some reason. One thing I will say this movie does better than most other Marvel movies is the villain. This essentially has 2 sets of villains, but what ends up being the main villain is fleshed out well. You, in some ways, understand the character's motives, but because of how the story unfolds, there's more of a weight to that character and to the battle than there are in a lot of the movies. As far as the bad points of the movie, I would say the story is a lot less focused than the original. In the original, they had something that they needed to do. So they needed to grab this orb, and they needed to get it someplace. And that was kind of the goal, and they all came together. They had to break out of prison, they had to bring it there. So they were doing things. In this one, it's more like the story kind of happens to them. They escape someplace, they crash someplace, then somebody meets them, and then they go off and do their own thing, and then some other stuff happens. So that, I would say, is kind of a weaker point. It seems almost like an episode of a TV show, specifically like Star Trek or something. And as I mentioned, I liked that they fleshed out Gamora and Nebula's relationship, their characters, but I think those scenes were a little heavy-handed and could have been handled a bit better. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a really fun movie. It's very funny, has a really good soundtrack and score, and it's an all-around good time, essentially, to have in the theaters. It's pretty original as well. It doesn't fall in the same tropes a lot of sequels do, where they just try to do the same thing as the original movie. This one is different. That being said, I don't think it quite lives up to the first one. So, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is rated B+. So given that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a movie about a bunch of rebels that come together for the greater good to fight evil, name a movie... Oh wait, that'll narrow it down too much. So given that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is set in space, name a space movie you really like. One I will say I really like is Serenity, the sequel to the short-lived TV series Firefly. It's really good. Essentially, it's got a bunch of rebels that come together and they do fight evil. I would recommend to check out the TV show if you haven't. I believe it's still on Netflix. If it's not, buy it. It's really good. And then watch the movie, which is also really good. Directed by Joss Whedon, who directed The Avengers and was behind Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But anyway, name a space movie you really like. You'd cop out and say Star Wars, but come on, be more creative than that. So again, name a movie you really like, set in space. Make your mark below in the comments section. Please like, share, and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is written and directed by James Gunn and stars Chris Pratt, It's Pat! Vin Diesel, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, and that guy with the sweet ass from Mallrats. Zoe Saldana, Gillan, Kurt Russell, and that guy with a nice ass from Mallrats. And that guy with a sweet ass. And that dude with the sweet ass from Mallrats 2. Mallrats 2 didn't happen. They seemed a little heavy-handed. You could cop out if you want and say Star Wars. Fuck me.